Auguste Rodin redefined the idea of sculpture in European art. Without losing any of its power and grandeur, he liberated it from the constraints of classicism and created three-dimensional forms which pulsated with life and energy. In effect, he recreated the role of sculpture as a public monument and became one of the fathers of modern art. Auguste Rodin was born on the 12th of November 1840 here on the Rue de l'Arbalète in the Mouffetard district of Paris, just on the edge of the Latin Quarter. Then, as now, the area was a labyrinth of streets with cafes and bars and vibrant street markets. But Rodin's background was modest. His father was a lifelong clerk in the police force and his mother was a country girl from Lorraine. His school record was poor, but from an early age, Rodin showed a great talent for drawing, enabling him to go to art school at the age of 14. There he worked relentlessly, and in his spare time he went to the Louvre, making sketches of the Greek and Roman sculptures there. Excited by the three-dimensional art of the distant past, the young Rodin discovered sculpture as his true vocation, at a time when painting dominated the Parisian art scene. Like any artist embarking on their career, Rodin used those closest to him as his earliest models. The first to sit for him was his father, Jean-Baptiste. At the age of 19, he sat the entrance exam to the top Parisian art school, the École des Beaux-Arts, a prerequisite for success for an artist in 19th century France. Rodin was turned down on 3 occasions. The rejections, however, didn't dent his determination to succeed. But Rodin had to start making a living for himself, so he applied his skills to the decorative arts. He met the prominent sculptor Carrier-Belleuse and worked for him at the Sèvres porcelain factory, designing the friezes for vases. Paris itself was also undergoing a transformation. Baron Haussmann had been appointed to redesign the city, with massive building works in progress, offering work to builders and craftsmen. So Rodin went from job to job, contributing his anonymous efforts as a decorative artist, supplying ornamentation to buildings in the city. And it was this kind of work that would supply Rodin with an income for the next 20 years, whilst continuing to work on his own sculptures in his spare time. It was while he was working on the decoration of a small theatre in Paris in 1862 that Rodin met Rose Buret. Rose would remain his lifelong companion. A year into their relationship, a son was born. Domestic bliss, though, was not to last long. In 1870, France was at war with Prussia. Within weeks, the country was invaded and Paris fell. Rodin was drafted in to serve his country, but declared unfit due to his poor eyesight. But on returning to civilian life, Rodin was unable to find work in a city ravaged by war and with its citizens near starvation. But his old employer, Carrier-Belleuse, offered Rodin work in Brussels, where the decorative arts were still flourishing. Rodin accepted, but had to leave his family behind. But the work enabled him to send money back home to support them. In 1876, Rodin made the obligatory trip for any aspiring artist to Italy. There he was able to study the works of the Italian Renaissance masters at first hand. Above all, the sculptures of Donatello and Michelangelo. Back in Brussels after his trip to Italy, Rodin began to rework a sculpture he'd begun a few months before, of a man standing with raised arms, initially called the Vanquished or the Conquered, but about to be transformed into the much more heroic Age of Bronze. In this figure, Rodin combines the 2 facets of art that have struck him most strongly in Italy. The first is the classical, in particular, balance, poise, grace and harmony. And then the art of the Renaissance, in particular that of Michelangelo, where Rodin sees a kind of restless energy and also the idea of a figure looking in on himself. And he gets, as his model, a Belgian soldier called Auguste Net, who he uses for weeks into months, studying his body almost as an object, looking at different facades, sometimes studying him from way up above, other times from down below, as well as on normal level, to produce a work that is also a kind of abstracted gesture of constriction and breaking free, where the figure seems almost to be clutching a spear, but that's taken away by Rodin. He doesn't want any accessories. And what he produces is something theatrical, but also something a little awkward. However, when people saw this work, there was a feeling that this was extraordinarily natural. Now, when it was first shown in Brussels, there was a murmuring charge went round that perhaps he'd cast it live from the human body. This, though, was refuted by Rodin, who took it to Paris in 1877 to show in the great salon where his reputation could be made. But the charge was reiterated, that in fact Rodin had cast this directly in plaster from a human body. And in the end he had to refute charges by showing photographs of Nate in order to prove that what he'd produced wasn't an exact replica of his model. In a way, he had to make bare his own artistic processes. And it took him 3 more years before he finally persuaded the French state and the new director of the Musée des Beaux-Arts to buy the work and finally cast the Age of Bronze in bronze. Now approaching 40, Rodin was at last starting to make a name for himself after 2 decades struggling for recognition. Rodin's big break came in 1880 when he was commissioned to produce 2 vast bronze doors as an entrance to a proposed new museum of decorative arts. Now, the museum was never finished, but the resulting work was the most important of Rodin's life, and the most celebrated cast of it resides here in the gardens of the Musée Rodin amidst the hustle and bustle of Paris. Now, for his inspiration or his springboard, Rodin took the work of the great Italian poet Dante, and in particular his Divine Comedy, that redemptive journey from hell through purgatory to heaven or paradise. But Rodin focused entirely on the first part of the comedy and produced the Gates of Hell. In effect, Rodin gives us a morality tale where he explores human frailty and the consequences